This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
If you step on that stage and you speak about government and you speak about our actions.
I mean, because they just got too much to lose by printing the truth.
They saw him as someone who was going to be able to destroy that methodology.
It would be kind of dishonest for me to sing them now, because I wouldn't really feel like singing them.
He was bigger than that.
I want to see this person immediately. Whoever's going to shoot me.
Why'd you leave the folk community, man? Why'd you disappear in the 60s? He goes, well, I was sick of people like you.
In January 2020, it was announced that Mangold would direct the biopic about Bob Dylan with Timothée Chalamet starring. The film was referred to as Going Electric. Mangold and Chalamet had been prepping for this film, it would seem a year or two before this announcement. And we'll get into that a bit later on, why that prep time was really important. But this production was not the first time that Mangold had dipped his toes into the world of biopic films with music, having been the director for the award-winning film Walk the Line back in 2005, where he worked with actor Joaquin Phoenix to pull off an Oscar-nominating performance for the actor, who would completely embody Johnny Cash and learn how to sing exactly like him.
Teach them what they don't know how. I'm going to Jackson.
Director Mangold has had quite the career. In fact, it's been quite the eclectic career, if we're being honest, with his films covering a broad range of genres, from films like 3:10 to Yuma, Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, and even working on an upcoming Star Wars film based on the Dawn of the Jedi. He's considered by some to be less of an auteur director and more technical in his approach, lacking that signature sign of authorship that you'd expect from prominent auteurs. Playing well with studio execs and outputting solid films, which honestly it does make a lot of sense why he would be chosen to direct a film for Lucasfilms, given Kathleen Kennedy's penchant for safe directors. But that doesn't mean he isn't an excellent filmmaker. With looming figures like Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, or Quentin Tarantino, a lot is made of auteur directors. And while they have earned their status for a reason, technical or classical directors who just output great, solid films are not as common as you would imagine, and Mangold's work could be seen as underappreciated in a lot of ways. In October 2020, though, they would hit a snag in the development of the film. It was revealed that the project had been unsurprisingly delayed and potentially was at risk of being shelved due to COVID. This was revealed by the cinematographer, Pheidon Papamichel, who cast a dark cloud over the status of the film, saying, "We were going to do Bob Dylan with Mangold. That didn't happen. With Timothée Chalamet about going electric in the 60s, and would have been my third 60s movie in a row." Part of the reason it was being delayed, beyond just the usual challenges that resulted from the pandemic, was the unique challenges the film itself presented during COVID. The nature of the story and the time period would force a lot of close interactions. Pheidon put it this way: it's a tough one to pull off in a COVID era, because it's all in small clubs with lots of extras and period costumes, so you've got lots of hair and makeup. But Pheidon would try to give a positive spin on the film's future, saying, "I don't think it's dead." And just like Pheidon and Mangold would have to navigate the unique challenges of making this film, our sponsor Squarespace is solving challenges of their own with a new way of designing a website with its new design intelligence. The cutting-edge AI technology helps you to create a website that fits your preferred style and brand, but without you having to do all the heavy lifting. With dynamic dashboards, help with website copy, product descriptions, and a whole lot more, this helps you to have a professional site to drive clients or customers to. And with Squarespace payments, you can manage all of your payments in one place with methods like Klarna, ACH, Direct Deposit, Apple Pay, and more. You can even collect invoices from your clients through Squarespace, keeping everything in one location. So be sure to try out the awesome new design intelligence system now at squarespace.com, and when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/FrameVoyager to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using the code FrameVoyager. In the meantime, Chalamet would take the extra time during the pandemic to do some research on Bob Dylan.
One of the things that makes Bob Dylan in this period so ripe for exploring is how guarded he's been the rest of his life.
So this is what?
I don't know. But also that he's remained this elusive figure, you know, where not that a biopic is worthy, because when can you ever really say a biopic is worthy, but there's a finite amount of Bob Dylan material online.
In fact, he had been doing a lot of research even before the pandemic, with some early videos of him practicing on the set of Dune in 2019 just coming out.
This is you in your Paul Atreides, like attire, like formal Paul Atreides,
Yes,
court
this is formal Paul Atreides, exactly.
And you're practicing. What are you singing here?
This is It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry, with some Dune lyrical variations by me.
Jim?
pandemic, though, he would travel around New York and New Jersey to locations important to Bob Dylan and try to get a sense of where he lived and the times he grew up in. He would even rent out an Airbnb property in Woodstock. "It's not like I'm suffering from lack of connection otherwise," he said, "but it just really feels like I'm connecting to something here." It is impressive some of the lengths Chalamet went to early on for this role, especially considering that he didn't actually know much about Bob Dylan or his music before taking it on.
I knew very little about Bob Dylan other than that a friend of my father's growing up was obsessed, one of these Dylan maniacs and Dylanologists with a striking black and white picture of Dylan on the wall.
But that did not deter Chalamet from really embracing this role and diving into the research of it. And in a way, he was really able to approach this character with an unclouded perspective of the nostalgia that can come from remembering certain historical figures that you grew up with. But in doing some research on Mangold's past film Walk the Line to see how Joaquin Phoenix embodied Johnny Cash in a similar fashion, he felt a bit of pressure.
The Johnny Cash movie that Jim Mangold also directed, the Johnny Cash story is a little clearer from a not a tragic perspective, but from a narrative. The flashback beats that then walk hard. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Yeah.
Like brutally, you know.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of watching 5 minutes of that movie before I started this. And I'm like, oh my God, I'll never be able to do this, you know.
But as he began to dig further into his research of Bob Dylan, he noticed that he had more in common with him than he initially saw.
It's kind of fraught to make parallels in my career because I never want to put myself in the same boat as the legendary Bob Dylan, but it's something I can relate to too, where I feel like I did struggle in my career and I could speak to in a different way, but equally my career did take off when I was 20, 21, 22.
You don't have a cell phone?
Nah.
Good girl. The government didn't have to put tracking devices on us. We bought them and put them on ourselves.
I don't own a tracking device.
And the kind of rooms I was in, kind of like these press conferences that Bob was doing very young. I was younger than what the intellectual, circumstance was sometimes of the rooms I was in.
In a way, A Complete Unknown is also a chance for Chalamet to break out of the typecasts, being hired to portray the same kind of vibe or character over and over again.
Yeah, that aspect of self-invention, it was freeing to me at a time where already in my career, people want to know you as a certain thing. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm not saying, woe is me.
What about the flat tire?
This is a real concern of potentially being stuck in a certain kind of role for the rest of his career, which became another connection between the actor and the musician, with Bob Dylan struggling to change his musical identity in the past.
And also I've had a life experience. I want to say it's weird, but I can relate to some of these things he went through. So Bob wanted to be a rock and roll star. Equally, I wanted to be a big movie actor, right? But if I auditioned for the Maze Runner or Divergent, it was like, the feedback was always, oh, you don't have the right body. Or I had an agent that called me and said, you gotta put on weight.
It's no use, Joe.
Please
Joe, we've
don't.
gotta have it out.
No,
I have loved you ever since I've known you, Joe. I couldn't help it. And I tried to show and you wouldn't let me, which is fine.
No.
But I must make you here now and give me an answer because I cannot go on like this any longer.
Please.
And then I found my way into these very personalized movies or something. For him, it was folk music,
And the tide will sound and the wind will pound.
When you think about Dylan, Chalamet remarked, you think about what Joel Cohn said about the rapidness of the art. I'm just like, trust the beat of your own drum. Give this its best shot. Give your artistry its best shot. Through all this, Chalamet would put about 6 years worth of effort into preparing to play Bob Dylan, achieving a certain level of mastery of the guitar and, of course, learning how to sing like Bob Dylan. The live performance aspect of this is something we will discuss later on in this video. After some reports of not being sure the film would make it through development, Chalamet would confirm that he hadn't stopped preparing for the role in 2022, saying positively that the winds are blowing and are blowing in a very positive direction. By February 2023, the film would get its official title, A Complete Unknown, with Mangold confirming his involvement as the director just as soon as his work on the Indiana Jones sequel was concluding, and production would be set to begin in 2023. Well, production was supposed to begin in August 2023, but ended up being postponed by July because of the SAG-AFTRA strikes. Now, filming would finally get underway by March 16th, 2024, almost 7 months after it was supposed to begin. Coming back to work with director Mangold again was cinematographer Philippe Papa-Michel, who had worked with him in 6 previous films: Ford v Ferrari, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and of course the similar biopic on Johnny Cash in Walk the Line. He sees himself and James Mangold as classic Hollywood filmmakers. We love Steven Spielberg movies, and we're not ashamed of it. They discuss some different approaches they could take to the cinematography of this film, including black and white, like Phelan had done for the film Nebraska, which could potentially mark the transition of Bob Dylan to the electric guitar. I was like, should we do this differently? Should we be rougher? Should we do more handheld? Should we shoot 16mm? Should we do black and white? But in the end, both he and the director decided to keep the cinematography fairly straightforward and professional, as he described it. I admire other ways of storytelling, but we're not just going to force some style onto us. That's not how we tell stories. Some people might consider our approach too classic, but you know, we like Spielberg movies. In the end, they would employ the Sony Venice 2 and vintage anamorphic lenses, traversing all over New Jersey to film the movie. And locations were something clearly very important for this film, and NewJersey.com actually has an excellent list of the 49 locations of where the film was likely shot, as they even note the production took place in 20 cities and towns across 10 counties, which makes sense. Why try and recreate studio environments in place of the actual locations Bob Dylan frequented? Something Phelan was thrilled that they were doing, seeing modern filmmaking as a change in the nature of cinematography, and believing that not only are audiences burnt out from Avengers sequels built in studios, but the creatives making the films are too, saying they're looking for something different. I think the best days of cinematography are behind us, but interesting changes are happening. Back then, we went everywhere. We were the magicians. So shooting at all of these locations, in a sense, must feel like returning to his idea of the glory days of filmmaking. And while this is a bit of a glum look at the industry overall, there are some positive signs in the world of cinematography that show that cinematographers can still be magicians in indie films, and even some blockbusters.
Always I tell young filmmakers, I know you all want to work on bigger movies and work in Hollywood, but you have incredible creative freedom often by being able to have such flexibility to react and be instinctive, and you can't really do that on a big movie.
But in a complete unknown, even some of the magic of filming on location and production making changes to those areas to make them look more authentic to the time period, VFX, the new magician in town, was also likely used for filling in the gaps. Much like we discussed for the Joker film, utilizing sign replacements and match moving techniques to further sell the time period and remove those unwanted bits of the modern world, adding to a growing list of films the average audience member would never know used VFX. But even with the magic of cinematography and VFX, you still need your actors to bring a little bit of their own magic to the role, especially a role for a character that is already embedded in the culture. And Timothée Chalamet, as we mentioned previously, spent years preparing for this. The live performance aspect of this film was known very early on in the process, but when the director mentioned they were going to do all the songs live and have Chalamet sing it, many were surprised. A little bit of a bump early on, said Mangold, when I started to say to everyone, producers that had already been on the project and Bob's team, no, we don't need your recordings, we're going to do the music. Timmy's going to sing this himself. And they were like, how could you possibly conceive of that? I go, well, I actually did it on another movie already, which some had forgotten he directed, it would seem. When filming first began, the director was still not sure if they would use the live vocals the entire time. Mangold said in an interview that every song was pre-recorded as a precaution and to have a logistical backup. Audiences can hear those tracks on the forthcoming soundtrack because we didn't use them during the movie. But just a few days into filming, the director would see that all of the work Chalamet put into preparing for the role paid off. The scene that did it for him was a very intimate one in the hospital scene where Bob Dylan sang for Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. For this scene, Chalamet asked to try it live, and it set the tone for the rest of the film. Mangold recalled the ending portion of the scene. There's this moment where he finishes that song and he holds a note and just keeps hitting the low string on the guitar over and over again, and his eyes are kind of boring into Woody, and he's just holding this note, and it gave him chills. From then on, they just kept doing the live performances throughout the film, relying on their brilliant sound team, who would place time period specific mics throughout the room. The team would utilize over 40 different microphones throughout the course of the production. Thomas Maitland, the sound mixer, explained, the idea was to get a little bit of different sound in each different venue by using practical microphones from the period. That helped create a nice tapestry of sounds. But Timmy went 100% live. It was pretty amazing. They would also have to problem solve some technical issues based on the way that Bob Dylan would play his guitar, up high and close to the chest. I talked to Timmy early on and said, the only way that we're going to be able to do this is if I can wire you and your hair, and the microphone would then come off of his forehead and go right down past his mouth, right into the guitar. And though not every song is utilized fully in the film, just bits and pieces of them. For a live concert scene where Bob Dylan plays electric guitar, they would record the entire concert of songs live, from start to finish in one take. This was done to create the feeling of an actual live concert and allow the actors to really get into the mindset of the performance instead of just starting and stopping and repeating one song after another. In total, it's reported that Timothée Chalamet would sing about 40 songs in the film. Biopic films are incredibly tricky to pull off, especially ones that are based on legends still fresh in the minds of audiences. But Mangold has been here before and delivers a solid film that breaks the genre mold a bit. But tell us what you think of the film below. And also be sure to check out this video right here on another fascinating production.